The Richest Man in Babylon. This is a book that teaches financial wisdom through the parables of ancient Babylonian merchants. Let's begin with a true story from over 80 years ago. In 1934, an archaeology professor at the University of Nottingham received 5 clay tablets excavated by British archaeologists in Babylon. When he deciphered the cuneiform writing, he discovered it wasn't dry historical documentation, but rather a deeply personal account. It was the narrative of a Babylonian slave named Dabasir who had meticulously documented his journey from debt to great wealth, like writing in a diary. At that time, the professor and his wife were themselves burdened with substantial long-term debt. They discovered an unprecedented method of debt repayment in these tablets. Why not give it a try? Following Dabasir's principles, the couple successfully cleared their debt. Dabasir's debt-clearing story is just one of many tales from The Richest Man in Babylon, which contains numerous stories teaching financial wisdom and wealth building. The author, George S. Clason, was a prominent American businessman of the last century with extensive experience in publishing and financial expertise. Starting in 1926, he published financial advice in the form of parables and stories, making them as engaging as listening to grandparents telling captivating fairy tales. Among these publications, The Richest Man in Babylon became the most popular. For nearly a century, this book has inspired countless ordinary people on their path to wealth. Many companies, banks, and insurance firms have purchased copies for their employees. It's considered a Western self-help classic that, despite being published over half a century ago, has been translated into many languages and maintains its popularity. Consequently, Clason is regarded as a pioneer of modern financial education. In the book, Clason reveals the success secrets of several wealthy Babylonians. The key principles are remarkably simple. Focus on savings and investment. While these concepts may seem straightforward, implementing them effectively requires careful thought and strategy. Let's discuss this book from 2 aspects: how to save and how to invest. Let's start with savings. When it comes to saving money, many people might say, what's there to discuss? Obviously, the more you earn, the more you can save. But if your income is limited, trying to save money would lower your quality of life. However, this book presents a different perspective. It repeatedly emphasizes one point. If you're willing to save 1/10 of your income, you've already stepped onto the path to wealth. Looking at the experiences of several wealthy merchants in ancient times, this method proves to be both practical and effective. Like many young people in the city, Arkad survived by working for others. He worked as a scribe in the Hall of Records, spending long hours meticulously carving words into clay tablets, day after day. Despite his hard work, his wages were meager, and his expenses consumed all his income. Does this sound familiar? Many of us, in our first few years after graduation, live paycheck to paycheck if we don't land a high-paying job. As an ambitious young man, Arkad never lost his desire for wealth, though he struggled to find the right path until he met Algamish, a moneylender. This wealthy man shared valuable advice with Arkad. Algamish said, "When I decided to set aside a portion of my income, I discovered my path to wealth. You can do the same." The young scribe could hardly believe his ears. You might also wonder, is this really a method? But Algamish emphasized that this was enough to transform a shepherd into a moneylender. Incredible, isn't it? Though grateful, Arkad decided to give it a try. After all, Algamish's success was inspiring. Arkad thought that with his small income, he'd need to tighten his belt significantly and save every possible penny, barely keeping himself from starving. This earned him a stern rebuke from Algamish. "If you save 1/10 of your yearly income, how much will you have in 10 years?" he asked. Arkad quickly replied, "I would save as much as I earn in 1 year." But Algamish wasn't satisfied. Shaking his head, he said, "You're only half right. In this successful money lender's view, money shouldn't sit idle but should be put to work. The key was knowing how to activate it. As Algamish put it, every gold coin you save should work for you, like your servants. To acquire endless wealth, you can't remain passive. You must use your savings to make more money, and use that money to make even more." The snowball effect began to take shape. Though skeptical at first, Arkad decided to follow the moneylender's advice and started saving. Every time he received payment, He would set aside 1/10 of his copper coins. After several months, he was surprised by the results. This saving method didn't affect his regular expenses at all. He didn't feel any financial strain, and life continued much as it had before. Of course, like anyone else, Arcade would occasionally feel tempted by luxuries while walking through the marketplace, but the seed of saving had taken root, and he managed to resist these temptations. Later, Arcade began investing his savings. Though the beginning was rough, and he paid his dues through some costly lessons, he eventually discovered the path to wealth creation. When Agamish realized that this young man had learned how to make money work for him, he decided to add Arcade's name to his list of partners to help manage his business empire. Arcade fortunately took over Agamish's vast enterprise and through hard work expanded it further. He himself became quite wealthy in the process. After Agamish's death, Arcade legally inherited a portion of his estate. And guess what? He eventually became the wealthiest man in Babylon. Looking at this story, we can see that the path to wealth can begin with simple financial practices. Don't worry about quality of life. The issue is that we often confuse necessary expenses with endless desires. If we carefully examine our living habits, we can likely find some expenses that could be reduced or eliminated entirely, such as certain unnecessary social expenditures. Some might say Arcade became wealthy simply because he was lucky to be noticed by Agamish and inherit his business. But that's not the case. Think about it, Arcade was chosen because he demonstrated unwavering determination by consistently saving 1/10 of his income. Indeed, there's no such thing as free lunch. Arcade's success came primarily from his own efforts. But remember, he didn't start with unrealistic goals. He chose to do what was within his capabilities and persistently moved forward, one step at a time. What happened to Arcade later? By age 70, he had become Babylon's wealthiest citizen, famous throughout the nation. How renowned was he? So much so that the king of Babylon invited him as an honored guest. The situation was this. Babylon had previously achieved great prosperity through years of constructing canals and temples, which provided substantial income for its people. However, when these infrastructure projects were completed, the people found themselves without steady work and fell into hardship. The king of Babylon grew worried. What could be done? Hoping to find a solution among the youth, he ordered the selection of 100 promising young men. As the flowers of our nation and pillars of our future, what should young people focus on? The answer is learning about financial management. To learn about finances, they need guidance from teachers. That's why they invited Arcade, a financial expert, to train them on how to build wealth from scratch. The first principle Arcade taught was something you might have already guessed, saving 1/10 of your income. Arcade told a young egg seller, "Try putting 10 eggs in your basket every morning and taking out 9 in the evening. If you persist, eventually your basket will overflow. At the same time, create a budget to ensure you can live comfortably on 9/10 of your income. Following this method, an empty purse will gradually fill up. This is the financial wisdom of Babylon, where wealth was created by clever-minded citizens. If you were born in Babylon, your primary life goal would be learning how to become wealthy. Remember Dabasir, whom we mentioned earlier? Let's revisit his story. Originally, Dabasir wasn't a slave, but a free citizen of Babylon. Due to his youthful extravagance, he accumulated massive debts and fled Babylon, only to end up as a slave in Syria through an unexpected turn of events. After escaping back to Babylon with the help of a kind slave owner's wife, Dabasir was determined to defeat his only enemy, debt. His method of repaying debt mirrored Arcade's wealth-building strategy, strictly following a plan to save some money while budgeting for living expenses and setting aside funds specifically for debt repayment. At the beginning of each month, when Dabasir received his salary, it was an important day for his family. They would save 1/10 of their income, and no matter how difficult times were, Dabasir and his wife lived on 7/10, while using 2/10 to repay their debt. While working to repay their debt, they also sought ways to earn money with their savings. Dabasir had expertise in camels and knew how to select strong, healthy ones. He seized an opportunity to buy some quality camels and made 42 silver coins on his first venture. Eventually, Dabasir repaid all his previous debts, discovering that paying off debt was easier than running from it. He recorded these experiences on clay tablets, which centuries later became a guide helping a British professor couple get out of debt. This proves that ancient wisdom remains relevant today. To summarize what we've learned about saving, saving doesn't lower your quality of life because it helps you identify unnecessary expenses. The key is to save 1/10 of your income. You've already stepped onto the path to wealth. Moreover, every penny you save should work for you, generating more money and slowly snowballing your wealth. Looking at the experiences of several wealthy merchants in this book, this method is both practical and effective. You might want to give it a try starting today. Now, let's look at another matter: how to invest, or in other words, how to make your money work for you. While there are many specific investment methods, they all follow fundamental principles. So what's the most important principle? Let's first discuss investment risks. What's your take on this? The familiar saying, high risk, high return, is probably well known to you. However, the wealthy merchants would completely disagree with this mindset. Making money through investments has a prerequisite: ensuring the safety of your capital, so you must never invest blindly. Earlier, we mentioned how Arkad paid his tuition when he first started investing. Let's see what lesson he learned. After saving money for a year, Arkad wanted to make his money work for him. What investment should he make? He remembered a sea captain he knew who frequently sailed overseas. The captain offered Arkad a business opportunity, suggesting he could buy some premium gems from the port of Tyre, sell them at a high price upon return, and split the profits. This money-making scheme seemed too easy. Arkad thought he could make a fortune without leaving home, and the captain's promise sounded wonderful. Why not give it a try? However, things didn't go as planned, and tragedy struck. The gems sold to the captain, though dazzling, were actually worthless pieces of glass. The poor captain had no expertise in identifying genuine gems. When Agamish heard about this, he appeared again with timely advice. This time, he taught Arkad to distinguish between valuable advice and useless or completely wrong guidance. He said, "Trusting a sea captain to know about jewels is ridiculous. Learning about financial management from someone with no experience in it is bound to lead to failure and loss." Think about it. Haven't we done similar foolish things? Acting on tips from relatives and neighbors, blindly following trends to buy financial products, only to realize after losing money that the person who recommended the investment was completely inexperienced. But Arkad was Arkad after all. Although his first investment failed and his savings were lost, he wasn't defeated. He started over, saving 1/10 of his copper coins from his monthly income. Since he had already developed this habit, starting to save again wasn't particularly difficult. When Arkad invested again, he had learned his lesson. He searched everywhere for experts in their fields and finally found a skilled bronze shield craftsman. Learning that the craftsman was short on funds, Arkad entrusted his savings to him to purchase bronze for shield making, essentially becoming a business partner. The craftsman's shields were of excellent quality and sold well, earning Arkad interest payments every 4 months. This marked the true beginning of Arkad's investment journey. The 100 young Babylonians who heard Arkad's story began to understand a crucial principle: make every coin work, multiplying like a herd of cattle. The key was to seek advice from experts and let professionals handle professional matters. Arkad wasn't just sharing life experiences with these young Babylonians. Before them, his most important student was his son, Nomacer. Unlike many of today's wealthy heirs, Nomacer didn't receive special treatment in his youth or simply inherit his father's fortune. Arkad's educational approach was to send his son out to make his own way, giving him a bag of gold and a clay tablet. The gold was for travel expenses and startup capital, while the tablet was like a mentor's guidebook, containing Arkad's 5 laws of gold. These rules weren't revolutionary, but they were distilled wisdom. After emphasizing wealth accumulation through savings, Arkad focused on investment strategies. He repeatedly stressed the importance of protecting acquired wealth, investing cautiously, trusting expert opinions, and avoiding swindlers and conspirators. Arkad gave Nomacer 10 years to explore the world with these 2 items. His rule was clear. His son must first prove himself capable of acquiring wealth and wisdom before inheriting the family business. 10 years later, Nomacer returned to Babylon, and his father hosted a grand feast. Before friends and relatives, Nomacer shared his decade-long journey. In his first city, he became an easy target for swindlers, and due to his inexperience, he lost his entire bag of gold. The wealthy son had fallen on hard times. However, Nomacer inherited his father's perseverance. Instead of giving up, he drew strength from his father's tablet. Fortunately, he found work managing slaves building new city walls, giving him the opportunity to practice the 5 laws of gold. How did Nomacer begin? He saved 1 copper coin from his first earnings. Familiar, isn't it? Sometimes the simplest methods are the most effective, often the most effective approach. After saving up some money, Norman befriended the slave owners. A golden opportunity arose when the slave owners discovered the local shortage of metal. After the city walls were built, the most crucial task was installing tall, sturdy bronze gates at every entrance. Clearly, whoever had metal supplies would make a fortune. Without hesitation, they organized a merchant caravan to mine metal from distant lands and transport it back for the city gates. Their foresight paid off handsomely. The king purchased their exclusive metal supply at premium prices, giving Norman his first fortune and laying the foundation for his future success. What does this tell us? It shows that newcomers to investing can only succeed under the guidance of experienced mentors. You can't beat experience. Let's look at risk management from another perspective. This story involves Mason, a successful moneylender in Babylon. One evening, Mason's friend came to him troubled. The friend had received 50 gold coins from the king as a reward for designing an impressive spear. While it was the largest sum he'd ever received, instead of joy, he felt confused. Why? His sister had always hoped her husband would become a wealthy merchant, but felt he never had the right opportunity. Now that her brother had come into money, her husband asked to borrow the gold coins for business, promising to repay once he made a profit. This put the friend in an awkward position. We've all likely faced similar situations. Friends asking to borrow money for questionable investments, leaving us torn between refusing and maintaining the friendship. Let's see Mason's advice. The wise moneylender, rather than giving a direct answer, shared a fable. A farmer who could understand animal language overheard his bull complaining to a donkey about working the plow from dawn to dusk without rest. The donkey only had to carry the master occasionally and could graze leisurely when the master stayed home, creating an unfair situation that frustrated the bull. The clever donkey suggested the bull should pretend to be sick when the slave came to harness him in the morning. The next day, the bull followed this advice, and when the slave came, he reported to the farmer. When the bull fell sick and couldn't plow, what do you think the farmer did? He harnessed the donkey instead, to take over the bull's work. And what happened? The donkey, eager to help his friend, worked the entire day, until his legs were weary and his heart heavy. It was a case of good intentions gone wrong. After this incident, the donkey and bull never spoke to each other again. They deliberately grew apart. Mason says this fable teaches a lesson. While helping friends is admirable, don't let it become your burden. There's no need to take on others' responsibilities. How did Mason handle his money lending? He carefully assessed each borrower's ability to repay and required collateral from everyone who borrowed. Years of experience taught Mason the safest loans were to those whose assets exceeded the loan amount. The next best option was lending to those with good credit and earning potential. In essence, risk management and successful lending are timeless principles, as Arkad emphasized in his teaching house. Speaking of reliable investments, Arkad specifically mentioned property, emphasizing the importance of owning your own home. A house is a valuable asset that can generate continuous returns. This resonates perfectly with our modern perspective. When it comes to property, ancient and modern wisdom align. Whether lending money or buying property, the goal is to ensure steady future income. Let's summarize. These stories all point to one principle. Invest wisely and cautiously. Don't chase high profits while ignoring risks. With investments that offer expected returns, reasonable profits are sufficient. In short, avoid unrealistic investments. Does being cautious guarantee great wealth? Nothing is absolute. While we emphasize avoiding unnecessary risks, this doesn't mean always being hesitant and indecisive. According to this book, to earn more through investments, one must be both cautious and decisive. These seemingly contradictory qualities actually complement each other. Don't believe it? Let's look at a counterexample from the book. Speaking of Arkad again, Besides teaching young people about finance, he often discussed wealth. In Babylon's taverns with others, an elderly merchant shared his story. Many years ago, when he was newly married, his father suggested developing wasteland outside Babylon's walls. The land was higher than the canal, so water couldn't reach it. His father's friend planned to buy the land and install 3 large water wheels to pump canal water for irrigation. Once the wasteland was transformed into farmland, the plan was to divide the land into small plots and sell them to city residents for cultivation, which would bring in substantial profits. Unfortunately, despite his father's repeated advice, the merchant failed to join this venture in time. Why? It's embarrassing to say, but he was captivated by beautiful robes imported from the East, spending his money on the pleasure of adorning himself. Hedonism can be one's downfall, but don't we often see this happening around us? Missing out on important opportunities for momentary pleasures, penny wise and pound foolish. How did the Wilderness Development Plan turn out? The final profits exceeded everyone's expectations, and his friends made a fortune. Predictably, the merchant deeply regretted his indecision. He shared this story to illustrate that hesitation in the face of opportunity and delayed action, even after careful consideration, allows good fortune to slip away. A middle-aged livestock trader then spoke up, sharing his own story of a missed opportunity. It happened like this. He spent 10 days searching for camels to purchase, a frustrating journey that yielded nothing. One evening, he returned to Babylon only to find the city gates closed. This added frustration forced him and his slaves to camp outside the city walls. A farmer, also stranded outside, approached him offering to sell his flock of sheep. His wife had fallen seriously ill, and he needed to return home quickly to care for her. The livestock trader was interested. His experience told him from the sheep's bleating that this was a high-quality flock, and the farmer's price was very reasonable. However, in the darkness, he couldn't count the sheep properly and wasn't sure if the farmer's claim of 900 sheep was exaggerated. The trader insisted on waiting until dawn to count the flock before payment. The next morning brought an unexpected turn. While the trader was still asleep, the gates opened, and 4 merchants rushed out to buy the flock. Due to food shortages from a siege, they offered triple the original price. The farmer naturally accepted this higher offer without hesitation. By the time he awoke, this golden opportunity had slipped through his fingers. Sometimes opportunities appear unexpectedly in the night. Our first instinct is often the best judgment, but hesitation frequently leads to missed opportunities. When real opportunity knocks, there's no time for hesitation. Who does Lady Luck favor? According to the book, it's those who take decisive action. In the realm of investment, it seems that taking action is just as important as risk awareness. These are the key messages that author Klassen conveys in The Richest Man in Babylon. To summarize, there are 2 essential things to understand about wealth: how to save and how to invest. Saving doesn't lower your quality of life because it helps you identify unnecessary expenses. Save 1/10 of your income, and you've already stepped onto the path of wealth creation. Make every penny you save work for you, generating more money through investments, like a snowball growing larger as it rolls. This method is both practical and effective. As for investment strategies, be prudent and avoid unnecessary risks rather than blindly chasing high returns. Focus on projects with reasonable profits that meet your expected returns. Equally important is taking action. When a good opportunity presents itself, make decisive moves to win Lady Fortune's favor. Do these methods provide some inspiration for your current financial planning?